Can you see me? Come here. Over the holiday season, a little movie called Wonder Woman 1984 that may or may not center around a fictional character that I may or may not have unhealthily fixated on for the past 21 years of my life came out. And there's a lot of buzz about it on the internet because it wasn't exactly what people were expecting. Spoiler alert. Now, I am not an expert. I do not work in comic creation. I was not and do not know anyone involved in the creation of this movie. However, as mentioned before, I unhealthily fixated on this character for a solid 21 years. So there's a lot in here that I saw in that movie that a lot of people didn't. So without further ado, let's talk about Wonder Woman 1984 and why I don't think it was very good, but I appreciate what it was trying to do. Y'all are gonna realize really fast that I have far too many Wonder Woman t-shirts. Since this video contains spoilers, I'm going to change shirts every time I change topics, so if you want to, you can fast forward to the change of shirts because it works. Anyway, the first complaint that a lot of people have with this movie is that the tone is completely different from the first movie. The thing about Wonder Woman is you have to understand that she is a very tricky character to put on screen, which is why it's only happened in 2 different iterations for live action that worked. What makes it hard for Wonder Woman to get Wonder Woman right is Wonder Woman was the first female superhero created. She has been around for 51, 61, 71, 81, 91, 51, 61, 71, 81, 91, 01, 11, 21. Wonder Woman has been around for over 80 years in the comics, and there have been multiple different retcons that have changed her backstory. And over the years, there's been, different levels of seriousness and different levels of campiness in the Wonder Woman comics because little things like Frederick Wortham's seduction of the innocent had to come in and fuck everything up. Thusly, there are 2 very prevailing versions of Wonder Woman that appear in the comic books. There is Warrior Wonder Woman, who, raised by the Amazons, etc. She's a warrior, she's a fighter, she's strong. And then there is Peacekeeper Wonder Woman, who is an ambassador to the UN from Themyscira. She can fight and kick ass if she needs to, but she usually uses logic and reasoning and love first and things like that. And those 2, depending upon who's writing the comic book, it switches between which version and which portrayal of her it is. There's also a lot of campy shit that came out of the golden age and the silver age of comic books that still exist in Wonder Woman comic books today. And when making a Wonder Woman adaptation, you kind of have to pick and choose what you want to use from the different versions. The thing that made the first Wonder Woman film so successful is they decided, you know what? We're gonna do Warrior Wonder Woman, and we're going to pick and choose all of the badass things from all of the different origin stories and different continuities that Wonder Woman has existed in that made her cool, and we're going to put them in a fucking movie. They literally, in an origin story, combined her original... Well, they took her original 1940s storyline and moved it from World War II to World War I, but they basically did the World War II storyline and made it World War I, and then they also did the New 52. Oh, by the way, she wasn't created by clay. She's the daughter of fucking Zeus, and they did it in the same movie, and it was really good. Wonder Woman 1984. To me, felt like they said, so we were able to do this with all of those elements. Now let's see if we can take all of the campier elements from Wonder Woman and make those badass as well. And while I appreciate that they tried, I think they kind of failed on some of them. And Stormy and I are going to educate you about that stuff. Okay, general things. The Wonder Woman that we get in the second one is very much Peacekeeper Wonder Woman. It's a lot more let's have a talk about peace and love and shit before I beat your ass sort of thing. The fight choreography in this movie is very much an ode to the Linda Carter TV series as well, in which she didn't have a sword and a shield. She had just the lasso and the bracelets and the tiara, which she through like a batarang, which is from the comics, actually. And I screamed when I saw that. I was so excited that that happened in the movie. I know that Patty Jenkins purposefully did practical effects instead of using CGI in this movie whenever she could. At a couple of points, they straight up did the shot from the 70s TV show where they're like, oh, she's running so fast that we have to put it in slow motion so you can see it. And she's on wires, so you're gonna very obviously see that the actress's feet are not touching the ground as she runs. That happened all the time in the 70s Wonder Woman TV show, but it was just a thing of 70s action TV shows. It wasn't like specific to Wonder Woman. It happened in Bionic Woman, it happened in $6 Million Man. It was just like a thing, and it's hilarious and really cute and campy to watch in those. But the thing is, the reason why we have CGI nowadays is so that we don't need to do that anymore. We can make it look cool, and we can make it look good. And while I enjoyed the reference, it pissed a lot of people off. Sorry. So I really appreciate the effort. We didn't need that. The invisible jet shows up in this movie, and I did not expect them to do that. Because the thing about the invisible jet, in recent years in the comics, it's been drawn more like, you know, there's an outline of a jet, but there's nobody in it, and like, you know, it's you could sneeze at it and miss it, you know. But the version everyone knows, and the version that showed up in the Linda Carter TV series, is a transparent jet with people sitting and just going. That's what I was expecting when Patty Jenkins said, hey, we're gonna do the invisible jet. Luckily, they gave us the other version, and it was badass. I loved the invisible jet scene in this movie. A lot of people on the internet are like, they redid the origin story for the invisible jet. They just were lazy and said, oh, my father Zeus made the island of Themyscira invisible, so I can make this invisible, and then she just does it. And yes, while that is like a very Mary Sue sort of thing, here's the thing. It's a better origin story for the invisible jet. It's not actually a jet in the comics. It's an alien life form that can shapeshift into any vehicle that she wants it to be, and it is in love with her. It gets better. Said alien life form is in the form of a jet and dies, and thusly stays a jet. So then for the rest of the 90s and some of the early 2000s comics, it's forgotten, but she's driving around in a dead guy. That had a thing for her. That's literally, and that, while funny, would have been a worse origin story than just, hey, my dad Zeus can do it, so can I. So I'm fine with that. Now, yes, I get that it is asinine to think that they could sneak in, steal a jet, have it randomly have fuel, and then she's like, oh, it's mine, it's invisible now. Yeah, I get that that's bad, but we're ignoring that because it was a cool shot, okay? The other thing that worked for me, to a point, was the flying scene. Yes, the wires were hokey. Here's the thing. It comes from an emotional moment in the movie, and it made me sob. Also, let me get my comic book. When she's got her arms out and she's flying and such, they directly recreated this panel. I'm going to show it. Directly recreated that pose, and I appreciate it because, especially from like the 80s onward, that is how she flies in this. Arms are out and she's soaring, okay? That's directly out of that panel, and it made me cry. Now, not to be confused with, lassoing the lightning has never happened. Yes, since they've retconned it and been like, she's the daughter of Zeus, every once in a while, she's got lightning powers and she can, like, ride the light. Like, there's one where she's holding on to a lightning bolt in a comic panel and she's riding it. But she doesn't lasso the lightning. I don't know. The only thing I can think of is there's a Silver Age comic back when it was, like, super campy where Wonder Woman is flying and lassos lightning to stop it from striking a building. But she's not swinging on it like Spider-Man, and I would love to have a discussion with whoever thought, let's take one panel and make it the completely new design for how she transports herself, because that was bad. The shirt has changed. Let's talk about the cheetah. A major complaint that I had with this movie initially is that they completely changed the cheetah's backstory. The wishing stone, not a thing. Maybe if comic people out there prove me wrong if I'm incorrect, but the wishing stone is something they took from like other cultures, mythological structures. It's not here, and it's definitely not involved in the cheetah's backstory. However, when we re-examine the cheetah's backstory, I understand why they changed it. In the comic books, Barbara Minerva is introduced as an archaeologist who is on an expedition in Africa, and she comes across this African tribe that is performing this ritual to an ancient plant slash god of the hunt, Urs Kartaga. And to give you a quick like New York Times editorial version of it, there's this ceremony where a woman in the tribe becomes the bride of Urs Kartaga by giving him a blood sacrifice from a kill that she has made, and thusly every full moon she becomes this cheetah creature and is given immortality, and she serves as like the protector of the tribe, this warrior for Urs Kartaga the god. Anyway, chaos ensues. Most of the tribe dies, including the current cheetah, and Barbara Minerva is like, yo, I want immortality. Let's make me the cheetah. So she kills her partner in like on the expedition and sacrifices him to the god Urs Kartaga to become the cheetah for immortality and shit. But there's one problem. Urs Kartaga likes his brides virgins. And she's not a virgin, so the god Urs Kartaga curses her that she is the cheetah creature on each full moon. But as part of it, when she is her human form and not a cheetah, she suffers extreme pain, is bedridden, and she can only survive and keep her immortality by constantly renewing Urs Kartaga's thirst for blood and creating blood sacrifices to him and basically losing her humanity and becoming a murderer. Now the thing about that origin story is if you strip it away, yeah, there's nuance and shit, but at the bare level, it's about a white woman who appropriates African culture and then is punished for not being a virgin. That's not really okay. You know? There's a lot of problems there. And it gets even worse in that in the 70s comics, for a while, the priest that officiated the ceremony to turn her into the cheetah becomes her servant and travels around with her. He's called her driver, he's called her butler, but basically it's a weird dynamic, kind of reminiscent of slavery, and it's not okay. Also, the African tribe is depicted in very racist ways. It's not good. And that is the way that Cheetah is in the comics for years. And while her origin does lead to a lot of really cool discussion about like racism and virginity as a social construct to demean women, it's really an offensive origin story. Now in the late 2000s reboot, New 52 and Rebirth, they change this origin story and make it so that Barbara Minerva was an archaeologist who works with Diana and is a friend of Diana's and actually teaches Diana English in the Rebirth era, so they're very close. And Barbara Minerva has been obsessed with finding the Amazons and gaining their immortality, their secret to immortality. And in the Rebirth era, Barbara has found the dagger and the tribe that worships Urs Kartaga, and she goes to retrieve the dagger, and Wonder Woman is like supposed to be on call to be like, if anything goes wrong, I'm gonna swoop in and save the day. But Veronica Cale, who I will discuss later in this video, creates a bunch of shit, and Wonder Woman is off saving the world, and thusly she misses the call. Like, I think she doesn't even have the tracker, if I remember right. She somehow misses the fact that Barbara is in trouble, and Barbara ends up getting captured and is forced to become the Bride of Urs Karthaga and become the cheetah creature, and thusly blames Diana for creating this monster, and it's really sad and very heartbreaking, and I love that. However, it still revolves around a white woman usurping African culture and being punished for being a virgin, and that's just not something that we need to have on TV right now. So while the origin story they provided for us was poorly written and not very good, I understand why they felt the need to replace it, and I really love what Kristen Wiig did with the character, because her transformation from the shy and timid Barbara Minerva to this very fierce villain that eventually becomes a cheetah was incredible. Also, a lot of people are bashing the CGI that they used to create the cheetah character at the end, and while the fight scene wasn't my favorite thing, that is the cheetah. Let me get my comic. The cheetah character is literally a cat with a tail, long hair, and a human form. It's basically a fucked up version of a werewolf that hates Wonder Woman. Do I think that she could have been better used in this movie? Oh yeah, to be honest, I think we could have had an entire Cheetah origin story movie, written a better origin story and developed it better, and not involved Maxwell Lord at all, because as I'm about to talk about when I change shirts, that wasn't Maxwell Lord, and he wasn't necessary to the film. Quick disclaimer, that was a very New York Times editorial glazed over version of Barbara Minerva's origin stories. If you want a more in-depth version of it, there is a wonderful channel on YouTube called Casually Comics that is run by a wonderful person named Sasha, who is, like, in my opinion, one of the internet's, like, foremost knowledges on comic books, and I always go to her channel when I have, like, questions and shit. So I'm gonna link her channel below with her video about Barbara Minerva's origin story, and then also her video about Maxwell Lord's origin story, because she's got really good shit in that. Changing t-shirts. Hello. Maxwell Lord. There's a great video that Sasha over at Casually Comics put out that you can go watch that explains the backstory of Maxwell Lord. But I'm just gonna leave it at a quick, this wasn't it. In this movie, Maxwell Lord is a businessman, an oil tycoon, that comes across the Wishing Stone and wishes to become the Wishing Stone. Don't know if that's possible, but there were no rules defined for this stone, so, you know, it's whatever. And at this point, my belief was already suspended, so I was like, cool, let's go with it. Whatever, I'm fine. And it basically gives him ultimate power, and yeah, all that shit. That's not Maxwell Lord. Maxwell Lord in the comics was created, he came on the scene after the Crisis on Infinite reboot of the comic storyline, and Maxwell Lord is initially a business tycoon who is not defined as good or evil for a while, but believes that there should be a group of people protecting the world. He forms the Justice League International, which is, you know, the Justice League in the 80s versions, and he is their liaison to, like, the government and you know, society. He's also the money he is the source of money that funds the Justice League on their missions and shit. And he is the person that, like, negotiates PR for the Justice League, because the 80s decided to make the comics about PR, which was really cool. And in that, he also becomes this force that's sort of manipulating things behind the scenes for a long time, and you don't know whether to trust him or not. But he doesn't really have powers for a while. In the 90s, comics in general made this move to getting rid of civilians and basically being like, if you don't have superpowers, you're out. So they retconned him into being a telepath. He also, for a while, was connected to a computer system. Again, Sasha explains this way better than I ever could, so go watch her video if you want. Suffice to say, it's eventually revealed that he is evil and has been manipulating things from the start and created the Justice League so that he could have control of all of these metahumans and super-powered beings. There's a much deeper explanation of that I don't have time to go into. In that storyline, Maxwell Lord, as a telepath, is manipulating Superman and sending him on like a murderous rampage and shit. And Wonder Woman gets Maxwell in the lasso of truth finally and is like, yo, what the fuck? How do I stop you? And he says the only way to stop this, to stop this murderous Superman and to stop me is by killing me. And she does it. Diana straight up neck snaps him. And it's really badass. Some people didn't like it, but I loved it. Because Wonder Woman, again, is a peacekeeper, but she's also a warrior, so she will do what is necessary. And she saves the world. Problem is, Maxwell Lord was broadcasting this live, so the whole world saw Diana murder Maxwell Lord in cold blood. No matter what, he was a very, very powerful political figure, so they're like, oh, Wonder Woman just murdered a very powerful political figure. Fuck. This burns a whole storyline where Wonder Woman becomes, she stops being Wonder Woman for a while and explores what it means to just be Diana. Long story short, too late. I think they wanted to end this movie like this, I can tell, because if you're going to use Maxwell Lord, you have to have that ending. You have to have the next step. You have to do it. But the problem is they can't do that. They can't do it because it's already been done in this DCEU continuity. Because in Man of Steel, the screenwriter and director of Man of Steel decided to do an on-screen neck snap where Superman, nice ambassador for peace, neck snaps Zod and kills him, and it's broadcast live. And they did it shot for shot. The Wonder Woman comic book panel just replaced Wonder Woman with Superman. And it's honestly the reason that I hate the Man of Steel movies, because they legitimately hijacked a storyline that is one of the, pinnacle important storylines for my favorite female character and gave it to a male, which I think is one reason why the Maxwell Lord character in the Wonder Woman 1984 movie is not the Maxwell Lord from the comics. I have a proposition here that is a little bit too late, that I'm like, we maybe should have done this. Maybe should have done this instead. So the Maxwell Lord in this movie, right? Business tycoon. Corrupt, but doing it all for the good of, lining of his pockets and etc., but also at the end for the good of his son. That's Rebirth Veronica Cale. In Rebirth, Veronica Cale has a daughter, and she is, psycho business tycoon that's manipulating everything. But there's literally a storyline in the Rebirth comics where Veronica Cale manipulates Cheetah into becoming the Cheetah again to get to Wonder Woman, and through a bunch of shit, it's all in an effort to save her daughter. It's a very baseline explanation of that, because there's a bunch of gods involved, and the said daughter is actually the bride of Hades currently. But bare bones of it, Veronica Cale, business tycoon, manipulates Cheetah into fighting Wonder Woman to save Veronica Cale's daughter. That's this storyline, just they inserted Maxwell Lord instead, and I think it could have been a much better movie if they just did Veronica Cale and said, hey, we don't need a male antagonist in this movie. We don't. We could have all of the main players except Steve be female. And I honestly think that would have been a better choice and it would have been badass. So maybe with Wonder Woman 3, let's ditch the male villains. Let's just have the female villains, because they're better. The female villains in the Wonder Woman canon and the Wonder Woman storyline are way better than the male villains anyway, except maybe the gods. But even then, I prefer Cersei, the evil witch, over fighting Ares. Let's do another one. We changed shirts. We're switching discussions again. My last qualm with this movie is the existence of Steve in it. I love Chris Pine's Steve Trevor, and I think the first movie, exactly right, got the attraction that is between Wonder Woman and Steve Trevor and their relationship and just the beautiful partnership that is those two. But by the time we get to the 70s comics, which they're pulling from a lot in this movie, Steve's dead and he doesn't come back. And in the 80s comics, which is also what they're pulling from, the George Perez version here, Wonder Woman and Steve, like, Steve's alive again because they rebooted it and like redid the origin story, but Wonder Woman and Steve don't have a relationship in that they're not romantic. Steve and Etta are romantic, and Wonder Woman and Steve are just friends and partners. And it's really cool, and I love it because in those 80s comics that George Perez is so iconic for. I'm pointing at the floor because they're sitting on my floor right now, but you can't see that. Wonder Woman doesn't have a romantic interest, and she stands on her own, and it's incredible. And it's one of the reasons I love that storyline so much is she doesn't have a romantic interest and she doesn't need one. Yes, there's a couple of times where like Hermes is hitting on Wonder Woman or some shit. And there is a second where she has a crush on Superman, but then she's like, you know what? I don't need that. And it's badass. And I really think that that would have made this movie better. You don't know. They bring Steve back by having him possess a random man, and Diana sees Steve, but everybody else just sees this random dude. And like, I love Steve and Diana. I will always take more Steve and Diana. But the implications of that storyline don't really work, because there's a lot of things that happened there that happened without the consent of this man whose body it is, and that's not good. I love you, Chris Pine. It wasn't necessary. Right. Shirt switch one last time. You've already seen this one. It was in the other Wonder Woman video. What I want going forward in the future, because they have Green Light Wonder Woman 3, and I think it's going to be really good because they're going to redirect after the slight veer from course that was this movie. If they're going to do more than one villain, they need to be female villains, and if they're gonna do just one, it needs to be a female villain. We don't need another male antagonist. We don't need to give the male antagonists the screen time, because there are so many beautiful female villains out there that don't get screen time. I would love Circe, the witch and goddess that manipulated shit, would love her on the comic panel. I would also love to see Cheetah again. I don't know. There are storylines where Circe is manipulating Cheetah, and such. Do that. Circe even turns humans into animals to do her bidding, so like, there you go. Perfect. If there is any romantic interest in this movie, it has to be with Batman, because Wonder Bat is the only ship that exists nowadays that I like. I know there are others. I don't care. I don't like them. Or more interesting, let's explore Diana without a man, because she doesn't need one. Lastly, I want this one to be set in Boston. I want the Capitellis family, and Capitellis family are a single mother and her daughter who Diana lives with when she first moves to Boston in the 80s. And I want that because they're incredible characters, and Vanessa Capitellis eventually becomes the Silver Swan villain, which is such a good storyline and very well done. Since this movie is taking place after Justice League, and that would mean that the world would be aware of the metahumans and aware of Diana's existence as Wonder Woman again, maybe let's explore her as an ambassador to the UN. Let's explore that facet. That would be a really cool way to marry the warrior Wonder Woman with the ambassador for peace Wonder Woman. Let's join them together. We could do that here. And second and lastly, please keep the flying. It was cool. Let's ditch the lassoing the wind, because that was bad. If you enjoyed this video and stuck around until the end, thanks for sticking around and helping out. This one was a long one. If you want more chaotic bisexual content, don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you can get my videos whenever I decide to post them. Also, like and share this video, please, so that we will interact with the YouTube algorithm and get it out to a lot of people. Because I there's a lot of people on the internet talking about how bad this movie is and not a lot of people explaining what they were trying to do. And I just think that that's important. Not just because I'm fiercely protective of this character. Anyway, yeah, that's until next time. This has been the Bye Book Boy. Thanks for listening. I'm saying bye.